Okay, are you ready? We are ready? Okay, Ruth? Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second part of the LA Babaylan event celebrating our ancestral tree. Tonight we have a very special guest. She came like, how many miles is it from from the Philippines to LA?
3,000.
How many miles? 10,000?
3,000 miles.
3,000? 8,000 miles across the seas to come and be with us. Can you imagine that? And so she's here with us to speak about something very close to her heart. And this is about Filipino Kapwa. Filipino indigenous psychology, Filipino indigenous systems, practices, and knowledge. Please welcome our very special guest and also a keynote speaker at the first International Babaylan Conference, Dr. Katrin de Guia.
Thank you, Mila. I had to swallow my food really quickly. And then tried to follow it up with a chewing gum, quickly, so that the words can come out more smoothly. Yes, but thank you very much for all for coming. And of course, we all want to invite you for the Babaylan Conference in Sonoma State University. It will be probably something like this, only much bigger, and also with workshops. You have workshops there that teach you some of these forgotten arts and practices. And well, you may wonder why this white person here talking about it, but my husband is Filipino. And I'm staying since 30 years in the Philippines, and I love it. And I don't want to stay anywhere else. And I have 3 Filipino children. They are already big, but of course in the Philippines, children are forever children and stay very often with the family. Our oldest son, Kidlat, is a filmmaker, documentary filmmaker. He is staying in Manila, and he is 36 years old, 35. And the youngest is 27, and they are all 3 artists. Our second son, some of you have talked to me, they saw him coming up in this or that paper. He's a painter. The youngest is a mosaic maker, and of course their father is Kidlat Tahimik, and yeah, that's his name, his adopted name. His name is actually Eric de Guia. That's why I'm Katrin de Guia, and he actually had a court case against with the municipality in Baguio in Trinidad. He had a court case for changing his name. He said his name is Eric, and you can just imagine Eric is about like a head smaller than me, and Eric is not blonde and tall, but Eric is small and brown and has a beard, and is the most loving husband and father. But of course, when we were living in Germany, we met in Germany, and when we were living together and sometimes went to parties, and people knew me, my friends, then they asked me, "Where is Eric?" And I said, "There's Eric." And they said, "Ah." But of course, this is one of the reasons why he wanted to change his name, also because he said his name is a Filipino name, it should be a Filipino name, but most Filipino names are today Spanish, American, European, whatsoever. That's why we named our children Kidlat, Kawayan, and Kabunyan. Kidlat means lightning. Kawayan means bamboo, he's very tall. And Kabunyan is the sky god in the Ifugao world. Means also something like mountain. And all three kids wanted to be Filipinos. They're Filipinos by choice, with a German passport, and also a German passport. And of course, part of this is due to the education they got. They got to learn and be appreciative very early of their beautiful culture. I personally, when I came to the Philippines, I was also a little bit overwhelmed. Overwhelmed in a good sense, overwhelmed also in the sense of not understanding anything. Because if you, Kanina, if you saw this Harana exchange, this is one of the Filipino ways. Not everything is said with words. Yeah, you have people speak through songs, people speak through poetry, people speak through gestures. It's basically not always the verbal language. And this is for, let's say, a German or an American, very hard to understand. What is going on, they ask. And the husband of Lenny told me the other day, Lenny is also married to an American, and he told me, you know, when I went to, the first time when I'm with my relatives, my Filipino relatives, it is as if they very quickly form a network, and they all understand what they are talking about, and I just can't plug into this network. I don't understand why they are all laughing. And I said, you know what? That's how I felt. That was exactly what I felt when I first came to the Philippines. And it took me maybe 5 years of understanding and 10 years. Of course, I had big help. I had help from very creative artist friends of my husband. They taught me that understanding, he had a word for it, mag-unawa. Mag-unawa is you understand, but there's also another word, intindi, which is of Spanish origin. And intindi means you understand what somebody says. But then mag-unawa is you understand the spirit of the word, the spirit of what is being said. And later when I read also talking about this network, right? This network of communication that builds up, and everybody who can tune in is part of it and understands it and can laugh and enjoy it. And this is another aspect of the Filipino culture that I later learned more about it in my study at the university. After about 10 years in the Philippines, when I thought I knew everything about the Filipinos, suddenly I realized I didn't understand anything. I didn't just know. I knew only the surface. I didn't know what was really going on when they said yes and they meant no, or when it was better asked for to be silent instead of talking. And then, as a student of psychology, because after our children were already going to school, I went back to school too. And I became a student of psychology. And in my first year undergrad, because I must say I'm an artist, I have an artist degree, I studied art in Germany, and when I came to the Philippines I was a mother, and then I decided I would like to go on developing my career, so I studied psychology, my second love in life. And so I studied psychology, and suddenly I came across this article, Kapwa, the core concept of Filipino psychology, of Filipinos. No? And what does Kapwa mean? Kapwa means the shared self. And the article was by Dr. Virgilio Enriquez, whom we fondly call Doc E, and who was also the mentor of Lenny Strobel and others maybe here in the room. And this article, Kapwa, the shared self, as the core concept of Filipinos, or as the core concept of Filipino psychology, immediately kind of clicked something inside of me, it flipped something on, a deeper understanding, and I felt this was the key that locked the door to my understanding the culture. Because this is what these networks do, no? People in the Philippines have the unique ability to connect immediately among themselves, not only among themselves, but also to strangers, even total strangers. And let's say from the German culture, where we address people as the other for a very long time, until you switch from the sie, the third person, to the du, the second, from the plural to the singular, it takes a long time. Of course, in America you have a culture that is much more open, and you use the you immediately even among strangers, no? But even for American people, usually the friendliness stays up to a certain level. The deeper sense of privacy, sharing intimate information is not right away happening. You have to be really good friends before you talk about the things that really move you. And in the Philippines, there's this sliding and gliding kind of conversations that lead from an outer understanding, oh, how is the weather, to later to a very intense and emotionally involved conversation. And the beautiful thing about this is that usually it's non-committal. You can have this deep conversation with somebody that you meet in the bus, somebody that you meet in the village, and yet you are not obliged to follow up this person forever or want forever. It is this one sacred moment where you come to recognize each other's humanity, and that you're special, you share your beliefs, you share your family story, you share your concerns, maybe you cry on each other's shoulder. Everything is very honest and very deep. And then you go away, you work yourself into another person and then out of another person. And the elegance and grace with which this is done is something that always fascinated me as an observer. But when I found this theory on the Filipino personality, which I then later described in my book, and which I will talk about in this Babaylan conference, when I found all of this, I suddenly understood a little bit better, and I could start to practice that too. So basically, the shared self is quite unique to the Philippines, and this morning, Lenny asked me, because we all stayed together in somebody's house, in Vidal's house, and there's a lot of laughing going on and a lot of sharing and intimacy. And so Lenny asked me, is there any difference between here and there? How do you feel about these conversations, what is going here on around the living room table? Is this different from the Philippines? And no, it's not. It is, whether you're in Germany, whether you're in America, wherever you are in the world, whether you're in an airport or whether you are in a private home, this kind of conversation, of which Lenny's husband called forming a network of understanding, this happens very quickly and it's very unique. And this is also where my interest as a scholar and as a person comes in, where I feel that Filipino psychology is extremely important for the globalizing society, because globalizing society has brought a lot of alienation, where people just cannot get to the sameness to the essence of being human very quickly. But Filipinos can do that, and it can be learned. It's a certain way of just staying open, being honest, being meaning what you say, and sensing out the other, what they need, what they want, whether to stop or whether to go. I'm not very good yet at this, in all these fine nuances of the psychological nuances of weaving in and out of other people's lives. but I learned a little bit of it, and I must say it is something beneficial even to be around any human beings. And I feel we should not all learn, just like this intergenerational learning. That is a very Filipino idea, although it's not unique we have the effort of two women in Germany who were able to create this intergenerational homes. But the idea that learning never stops and that elder person have a lot to give and younger person like to have elder people around and learn from them, this idea is not very popular today in many urban centers, and I feel something is getting lost there along the way. And I would like to just share this shortly. I taught in a class in Sonoma, and there was one girl who greatly agreed when she heard about Kapwa, and she said, yes, here in America, she said, we don't even talk to each other anymore. Yesterday I walked into a locker room and all these are girls from the different classes and we all study here, but we don't even look at each other anymore. We don't even say hello. And she said she made then an effort to say hello, and there was a response. And so that we all kind of are able to extend ourselves with others, to others. I think it's good to have Filipino psychology around and to look into this and to look at it in a scientific way and to practice it as it is done today in this evening. And I hope if you want to know more, I wrote a book on this issue. It is called Kapwa, the Self in the Other, and they have it over there. And basically, is there anything else? I wanted to... Come to the conference. Yes, really come to the conference. Those of you who can. Let's form this network, not just intergenerational, but inter-society, inter-group. You know, my professor, the first time, I would like to share this one still, that's why I looked in her direction. Is it coming from the idea? Okay, it came somehow. I would like to describe to you what fascinated me on Filipino psychology. It's a very simple thing. I went to, after I read this article on Kapwa psychology, I went to Manila, to the institute of my professor, and I sat in the back of the room, and I listened into him and his class. They were on the other side of the room, and it was a graduating class, and they were all on the master's level, and there was an undergrad student. And so I just sat there very shy at the end of the room, and they were talking about concepts, Filipino concepts, all the time, and they talked in Tagalog. And at that time, hindi ko alam Tagalog, I didn't speak Tagalog. So my mind said, you can't understand that. And yet I said, no, I can understand it. And my mind again, you don't speak Tagalog, you can't understand it. And I said, but I can understand it, and I can understand it. And later I went to my professor and I asked him, what we talked about, was it this and this and this? And he, as if it was the most natural thing of the world to understand head to head, he verified it and he elaborated it, as if that was normal. And I found this very curious and very often. And it has to do with this network. Now you can immediately not only hear somebody's words, but you also understand their images, the inner images. And that's how you talk with animals, and how you talk with lovers, and that's how you talk with very, very old friend, or as a husband and wife. If you know each other so long, then you can talk like that. And I found theories in the Western drawers that verified that there was a difference in understanding that they said today divides humanity. This is Giordano and Liotti, And in America, the psychologist that picked up this theory would be Michael Mahoney. And he said, basically they say there are two ways of understanding, and that is the tacit understanding, the wordless understanding, and the explicit understanding that only runs through words. And in many ways, the tacit understands everything, but often doesn't have the words to talk back to the explicit person. But the explicit person, the person who relies only on word and not on the heart to understand, very often misses out on all the subtle nuances. No? And for that reason, I think it's a really good system to teach children, to understand in both ways, even beyond the adult age, that they can be sensitive towards the environment, and that at the same time they can be explicit and explain what they understand intuitively. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katrin. So if you want to know more about Filipino psychology,